Alright folks, welcome to another episode of Tactical Enlightenment, their YouTube series dedicated to showing huge battles and then trying to illustrate advanced tactical formations with your forces in those battles. As most viewers are used to, we have very large battles, and I'm going to run with player damage at 25% in order to survive the battle. Of course, nobody wants to watch the artificial intelligence clash against each other. You can do that on your own computer. So we're going to run with lower player damage, which it does obviously give me an advantage, but considering I'm outnumbered at least 2 to 1, I think that's just fine. So next we'll talk about our battle layout here. These Assyrian fucks, which reminds me, I'm going to swear some. I'm former military folks. So I will not make any direct attacks on people. There won't be any racism, but I'm former military, so swearing is going to be part of the episodes where I have voiceover. If you don't like that, there are many other channels for you to watch where they're good Christians and never swear. Alright, so getting back to the tactics here, we must stop the Archery from crossing this bridge, and at the same time pound them with archers, right? We've got nice archer groups here, the 4th and 5th Corps. Those are both archer groups in my army, and we're going to use the 3rd Cavalry in this big long line here as a shield wall, and that's literally their only job for the first, it might be 10 minutes of this fight, is to stand there, hold their shields up, and be human piñatas. And the effect of that is that my archers will be able to sort of shoot through the gaps between them, while the enemy archers will many times find an armored horse with their arrows instead of my archers. And of course, many of the arrows are just hitting the shields. So that gives our archers a great advantage in this battle. One of the keys to this battle will be preventing the Archery from getting across the bridge. In fact, we actually want to try to jam them up on the bridge itself, and then shoot them full of arrows, really decimate their forces, and do the most damage we can. That won't last forever. We'll run out of arrows. Somebody once told me that the AI doesn't run out of arrows. Maybe the enemy AI doesn't run out of arrows, but your own troops definitively run out of arrows. In fact, you'll see them trying to pick some up. Well, they wouldn't be trying to pick them up if they didn't run out of arrows. So the 2nd Cavalry, that's my mobile cavalry unit. It's full of my best cavalry. A lot of them are elite, noble type troops. Their purpose here is frankly blockading the bridge, and then in traditional battles I'll use them more as the strike cavalry, the groups that will be making, charging against their infantry and so forth. So the archer wings are spread out, as you can see on the side there. They are in hold fire at this time. All their guys are holding a sword. We don't open fire until the enemy is close. You don't want them firing these Hail Mary shots across the whole battlefield and wasting their arrows. In a battle like this, it's going to be very challenging. We can't have them shooting 6, 7, 8 times where it just lands in the dirt. So we're in the early stages here of trying to blockade the bridge. You actually want to blockade them on your side, if that makes sense. So these cavalry that are a little bit too far towards their side, we actually want to drag our cavalry back, and then as their cavalry gets close, then you close the trap, right? We want our cavalry to pour in, look like a New York street on an afternoon on Friday, just totally jammed traffic, and nobody moves. Meanwhile, our archers then open fire on both flanks, and it's just Annihilation City. You will hear me refer often to the upper right screen, which is where it's showing, the combat fatalities, troops being knocked unconscious, etc. Obviously, you want that green most of the time. I mean, all the time, but especially here, right? It should be full of green because we have such a tremendous tactical advantage right now. The enemy is just lined up like pigs for the slaughter, and our 50 Battanian Fians and other elite archer troops are just target practice, right? It's fish in a barrel. So cavalry force is holding steady there. Also on the left side here, on my right side, I have what's called my 8th Corps. And you've probably heard me talking about it ad nauseum. I'm going to mention it again in case this is the first time someone has sort of seen the force in action. These are my elite troops. Napoleon Bonaparte, the great French conqueror of the early 1800s, and many other generals throughout history were keen on keeping essentially a reserve or a royal guard. And the purpose of them was diverse. There was many different reasons they kept that guard, In the olden days, of course, part of the reason was they were bodyguards for assassination attempts, almost like the Secret Service. But in more recent warfare, and by recent I mean 17th, 18th century, these reserve units were to be used at specific times during the battle, like especially if the battle was starting to swing in the enemy's direction. You would then send forth your reserve units in sort of a last desperate attempt to change the momentum of the battle, and they're very effective at doing so. I would encourage you to get used to using a similar kind of force in your own fights, and see what dramatic results on the positive side that yields for you. Right? So the 8th group is comprised of almost entirely elite units. Level 6, there's a lot of Britannian Fian champs in there. There's also a lot of family members and companions from my campaign. My family at this point is like 50-something members. Big. It's a huge family. I'm a third generation, effectively. The grandfather is the person I started this character off with, and they are now they've died. And this is the third generation is now out and about, right? So we have 50-60 family members and a bunch of other elite troops staffing and holding tight that 8th Corps. You notice they're staying back. That's very intentional as well, right? I'm not going to use them until I need them. Now they have projectile weapons, so they're still part of the fight, but we're not. God, I love the animation for them being shot in the neck with a javelin. Man, that would hurt. But I'm keeping my 8th force back, my 8th Corps back here for more pressing needs. Like in this case, one of the most obvious pressing needs will be if the enemy starts to burst through this blockade. Right, I must be able to keep a blockade here, because if they storm through with 300 cavalry, this battle is over. My archers will be interrupted. They'll be throwing javelins all over the place. Our guys will be getting skewered. It's not going to be a winning result. All right, so 8th Corps is in place. Archers are on both wings, just pounding away. It's almost all green death spam. But we're in the early stages of it, right? Eventually, my cavalry will get leaned out. They will get shot. They will get killed in combat. Just because they're in shield wall doesn't mean they can't die. But in the early stages of a battle like this, you would expect to be doing well, right? The enemy is still kind of adapting to what you're doing, and your archers are still firing arrows, right? Nobody's out of ammunition quite yet. Little guys are sneaking through. I mean, they're not little, but small amounts of troops are sneaking through the cracks here, and that's my job in the 8th Corps to clean that up. The cavalry's still jammed in there. It's still 6 p.m. on a Friday in New York. Nobody's going anywhere. Everybody's fucking furious. And in this case, they're all dying and furious. You notice me picking up a lot of ammunition. Any kind of a long fight, and I can promise you a fight with 7,000 troops total is going to be a long fight. It's never going to be a 5 or 10 minute fight. You want to pick up ammunition at all possible moments. Right? This is especially so with javelins, where you can see me just decimating the enemy here one at a time. Right? Javelin strikes, when you have very high skill and you get a lot better with your accuracy, is probably the most devastating single weapon in the game. Right? You just take these guys out one after another. It also goes right through shields. I've talked about that before a few times. To me, it seems possible that they might even adjust that at some point, where it's more likely to go through shields instead of just automatic. But until they do that, here we are. We're using the weapons that Tailworlds is giving us. All right, so the enemies are starting to break through a bit. This becomes a moment here where you start to consider using the 8th Corps. I'm hitting my own troops sometimes. You do that a lot with javelins. It's going to be a thing. Don't worry about it. Just keep moving on. So the enemy has broken through here, but I'm not aggressively pushing in my 8th Corps yet. You generally wait until it's obvious you need to use it. Right? I don't want this 8th Corps getting damaged, getting beat up, getting knocked unconscious in the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the battle. And now at this stage, it's pretty obvious that I'm going to need help, right? So now the call for them to attack has been made. I actually think I missed when my character made that command. But yeah, I made that call recently. So once the 8th Corps is sent in, right, we're up there with them. Right? We still want to be careful. We still want to play defensive, even with limited reduced player damage. This is probably going to be a 25 or 30 minute battle. Right? You're going to take a lot of hits. It's inevitable. There are arrows flying everywhere. Obviously, my guy's going to be waist deep in enemies much of the fight as well. But you want to be careful, right? So he's got a shield. You notice I picked up a shield early on. As soon as you're out or low on javelins, you want to pick up a shield. And right here, I'm in trouble. I just got shoved by cavalry right into the thick of their angry infantry. That's why I got to get out of there. And it's also a great time to whip that shield out, send in units with your command, hide behind your shield, and then back the fuck out of danger. Another thing you want to avoid is you want to avoid all these units getting jammed way too far on the bridge yourself, right? In that case, you're the one that's getting hammered by their archers on the other side. We want to keep all the action, all the battle, all the fighting near our side of the bridge. If you don't know, projectile weapons do less damage the further away you are from them, right? The game has a pretty good physics engine, and it basically lowers the damage considerably the further you are away from arrows, right? If you're right up close to arrows, it does lots and lots of damage. If you're a long ways away, it's not very much damage, right? This is kind of true to life as well. So we're pulling those units out of the bridge. We want the enemy to be on our side of the map, right? We don't want our troops charging the other side aggressively. We're very much in a defensive struggle at this point. Once in a while in a bridge fight like this, you'll gain momentum. You will have just a slaughter where the enemy's either panicked and pulling back, or your offensive forces, almost without you seeing it happen, will just be charging across the side, and you may have an opportunity to take the offense. But in this battle, with this many troops, I'm experienced enough to know that that's not going to be the case. We're going to have to play defensive. Even now, you can see us taking losses, and some of those losses are from archery fire from the other side, right? If we have 100 or 125 archers, the enemy probably has 200 or 300, right? We're outnumbered in every single aspect. So pulling our troops back, doing a reset of our shield wall of cavalry, helping out the archers, and pulling our 8th Corps. Now you want to be careful how far you pull your troops out here, right? You don't want to just pull them out and send them all the way to the other side of the field, because if you allow too much enemies to start pouring through the bridge, you can think of it like momentum. If you're pushing a car, if you push it a few inches and it stops, you're fine. But if you get 10 guys and push a car really fast, well, somebody better be on the brakes, because with all that momentum, as soon as you stop pushing it, that car's going to keep going for a while. So the enemy is a little bit like that. If you let them gain a huge amount of inertia here at the bridge, they will just pour through. Your tactical advantage of numerical disadvantage will be totally exposed, and the battle will probably be over. If you've seen other fights I've shown on the bridge, that's actually been the case. I try to make a habit of showing every significant battle. I don't show sort of middle battles that don't really have a consequence, or battles where it's just a massacre. 1,000 of my troops against 1,000 of theirs, and I lose 50 people. I'm not going to waste your time with that, unless there's some unique tactical approach that I'll take. So we're still doing really well. My two-handed axe guy, a lot of people have commented he's like a hurricane of death. I think that's pretty accurate. I've played this game now over a year with this character, and what I've learned is that one of the most effective things for hand-to-hand, especially if you can move fast, is to have high athletics and a very fast swinging axe. The longer axes that do more damage are more popular, but I'm killing a lot of people with one shot anyways already, so there's no reason to have an axe that's doing even more damage. It's much more valuable for me to be swinging it at 50% faster speed than those big, giant, heavy executioner axes. They look cool. They obviously have more range, which is a benefit, but in terms of net damage per second and net enemies killed, I find an axe in the 100 to 115 length and 80 plus speed range to be optimal, right? You're still able to reach guys. You can ask any guy, right? Length is important. So that's still a critical component of it, right? You've got to be able to penetrate the enemy, but you need speed too, right? Like that's a very much a critical part of combat, especially speed when you're fighting other elite melee units. If you're fighting a really fast enemy melee unit, especially with a one-handed weapon, you can come at them all you want with your battle axe. You're going to get smoked in the face a handful of times with a mace, and find that you're totally outclassed in that case. Right? So again, you can see the giant mass of horse archers over there. They're still raining death on our side. To mitigate that somewhat, I've moved a lot of our troops over to the right, to the enemy's left. A lot of times their horse archers will stay on your left, on the enemy's right. And if you know that and you see that happening, well, you simply move your enemy, or you move your allied troops to the other side. Let them shoot their arrows at like 12 cavalry over here. Meanwhile, your 150 archers are just raining death on their side. It's the little things like that that I think many players can probably improve. Just thinking about the battle a little bit more, using your critical thinking skills, and taking advantage, frankly, of the artificial intelligence, which, well, let's be honest, the tailwords are artificial intelligence. They haven't recruited ChatGPT yet, have they? All right, so the battle's still going pretty well. We are suffering quite a few losses, but again, we brought more troops to the battle this time than our previous loss to the Azurai. The good news is that reinforcements are coming in almost directly behind us here. In some battles, the reinforcements will come in terrible locations. Sometimes they'll come in between, you'll have the enemy between you and the reinforcements, which is basically a disaster and really bad game design by tailwords. But in this case, reinforcements are coming up beautifully right behind us. That allows us just to continue to replenish the ranks, and send more and more infantry. In this case, I've sent more infantry into the bridge, just forcefully trying to jam up that bridge, limit how much the enemy's pouring out, and then, again, fire more arrows into it. Here's that melee skill at work. One or two enemies is basically vanquished every single time. These enemies really have no chance against my weapon speed, and my character has 330 endurance and very often runs under a speed banner, so he's running around on the field like he's Usain Bolt as well. He's got some pretty heavy armor on. He could be faster than he is right now, but of course for surviving battles against enormous forces for a half an hour, you also want to be encased in steel like a tank, right? A true tank. So some people say he's not a berserker. That's fine. You can label him however you want. Other people have called him death itself, right? Because he's dealing massive damage and killing a lot of the enemy just by himself. I get a lot of comments. People are asking me, how am I doing so much micromanaging of the troops at the same time as fighting? And that brings up something I've talked about in another video. It's called span of control. It's a military concept they developed in the early 1900s, and it has to do with how much the brain is capable of I can't even process it myself right now. I'm trying to watch the battle and talk to you. How much the brain basically is able to process at the same time, right? You can think of it like juggling. You can't give orders to 30 subordinates and expect to remember what all those 30 subordinates are doing or keep track of them all. So what they studied in the early 1900s, this gentleman named Sir Ian Hamilton, he studied and discovered that the average mind is capable of taking care of about 4 subordinates. Right? Sometimes it's 5 or 6. Exceptional minds, maybe more than 6, which is part of the reason that I recommend most intermediate players to be commanding an army of 5 or 6 units. When you get to 8 units like this, it's obviously a lot to keep track of. I still lose track of units at the same time. As far as how you're fighting and micromanaging at the same time, you use little tiny windows in the battlefield to control your troops. I love it when guys get physically blasted by a hit and their body goes flying somewhere. I wish there was more of that. It'd be fun if there was a little bit of the 300 movie effect in Bannerlord. Finishing off what I was saying, though, the span of control. I'm a current firefighter. I was previous military, now I'm a firefighter at the end of this career. Your span of control is critical because you're just not gonna do well if you try to start playing Bannerlord last week and you're gonna have 8 divisions of troops. You're gonna forget guys. You're gonna send some guys in, totally forget them. They're gonna get annihilated. You're gonna have other archers that you told to hold fire. They're gonna be standing there with their thumbs up their asses, not doing anything. I would recommend most players start with 3 and then go from there. It's a little bit like juggling, in fact. I used that analogy before. Nobody starts with 6 juggling balls. Right? They start with 2 or maybe 3, and then once that's mastered, once that's easier for you, you can add more. The very same thing applies here to Bannerlord. Once you get to the point where you're very readily, very intelligently commanding 3 or 4 units of court, move up to 6, 7, 8. And I would move up incrementally. I wouldn't go from 4 to 8. I would go from 4 to 5 to 7 or something like that. All right, so the massacre is still on. People have accused me of animal hatred because I kill a lot of horses. No, horses are just, they're the nemesis of foot troops. When you're on the ground like this and horses are knocking you around, and, or like earlier you saw when the cavalry literally shoved me into the enemy ranks where I got into deep trouble. Enemy horses are very, very much your enemy in a battle like this. Like, they're a priority enemy. They're knocking your troops around, they're interrupting your archers. It's also much easier to kill the cavalry, or to at least dismount the rider, than it is to kill the rider on the horse, right? It's just a location area. The horse's legs are right where your axe is. If you get really good with your aim, you'll be wiping out the rider and the horse at the same time. But I don't, it's a video game, I don't have any problem killing every single horse that's in front of me. I've been hit and ran over and killed by horses. They're horse meat as far as I'm concerned. So this battle is actually quite a bit less tactics than a traditional open field battle. As you can imagine, right? We're not going to be doing a whole lot of flanking. We're not going to be doing a whole lot of feint attacks. Your main job in a bridge battle like this is to keep the bridge clogged. You can do little things like having your cavalry out there blocking enemy archer arrows. You can micromanage your infantry troops and elite divisions around the bridge a little bit. But this is actually a pretty good battle for me to do for my first voiceover. That way, similarly, I can manage my own span of control. The very first couple 3 videos I did of voiceover, it was an absolute disaster. I was forgetting units. I was saying totally irrational, nonsensical things. I had a really hard time effectively adding all of the orders I'm giving my troops and chopping my way through the enemy, all while saying rational, coherent things. I wasn't able to do that very effectively. So hence the voiceover here after the battle. And so far it still feels pretty comfortable. We'll see. I've never done this before. I may not be popular at all. I just want to help people get better at the game. I know a professor and a professor's assistant that are big on war history. I've listened to many lectures myself. I'm an enormous student of history, not just history in general, war history, political history, philosophical history. But war history gets me the most revved up, I guess you should say. I've studied the Napoleonic Wars in great detail, the 30 Years' Wars, the American Revolutionary War, even a lot of English war history. I know all about the Great Revolution and the First Revolution. And there's a lot of interesting tactics that have occurred through those times that can be applied to Bannerlord. This is a medieval game, so there's no arquebuses, there's no guns, there's no cannons and things like that. But a lot of the same tactics still apply. Napoleon was a big fan of movement, right? You want to be moving your troops on the field. Static troops are toast, right? They're getting pounded by archers. Static troops are easier for the enemy to attack. If it's cavalry, it's much easier for the enemy to charge your men down if they know exactly where they're standing. So you want to move a lot. It also confuses both the artificial intelligence and if you were playing against real-life opponents. Movement makes the enemy uncomfortable, right? And psychological warfare is part of war. If you are fighting a human opponent, you want them terrified out the gates, right? Maybe that's another reason I kill horses. This is, a ruthless approach to the game. So in this instance, we've really started to gain momentum, right? We're actually now meeting the enemy on the bridge, and in this case, I am going to attack. And the main reason is that the enemy, for whatever reason, is charging with archers. It's possible they're out of arrows and feeling a little bit desperate, but if they're going to charge you with archers, you should charge back. You should smile and send in your heavies and just watch the death spam go, right? I mean, they're not totally incapable of doing damage, but you should definitely be taking advantage of archers anytime you can. It doesn't mean that you can't set up archers on the flanks so that those archers can pound the archers. It doesn't mean you just have to fight headlong into any battle. You can always use tactics. But anytime you have archers right in front of you, it should be a priority to wipe them out. So I wish I brought up sort of the death count a little bit more often. It'd be nice to have some progress, but I also had a request very early on that I didn't do that very often, so I'm kind of trying to find a happy balance between that. I guess some people who are watching like the drama of not knowing whether or not it's going to be a victory. I'm pretty well known for showing defeats, even ignominious defeats, where maybe I think I should have won and I didn't. I like to have an authentic channel, where I'm showing pretty much all the same stuff that you'll probably go through. You're going to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. You'll probably make multiple mistakes in every battle. I do. And when that happens, you learn from those mistakes, right? It's the positive approach to life. Mistakes are just gains of experience. Right? Now in this case, I've purposefully let the enemy come across the bridge a little bit more because we're going to surround and drown their troops, right? You can think of it like a doorway to a house. If there's a guy in the doorway with his dukes up ready to fight, and you had 9 friends behind you, well, you wouldn't want to fight him directly at the doorway. Unless you were intentionally doing a one-on-one, right? But if you're seeking the greatest advantage, what you would want to do is back up and let that one guy, or see if he would come into the house, and then as soon as he's in the house, surround him with your guys and totally pound him 9-on-1. But the same approach applies to a bridge. If the enemy is kind of lined up right in the middle of the bridge and you're attacking them, there might be 6 guys abreast on both sides, swinging weapons at each other. And granted, you are hitting them with arrows, right? There's other advantages, but if you can get them to get to the mouth of your bridge, the entrance side to your side of the bridge, and then hammer them from all sides, kind of run the light coming off the bridge, what happens is they end up getting hit by like 30 guys on their 9 guys, right? Or something to that effect, right? And obviously the effect of that, just like the guy at the doorway getting his ass kicked by the 9 of you, if you can get more swords, spears, and glaives into the face of the enemy, you're going to have more success. Right? You can see it again happening here. There's like 6, 7, 8 enemies swinging, and I have like 30 guys just mobbing the enemy. Right? It's another way tactically to take more advantage of the situation. The same thing applies to when you're in peace. Right? You don't want them right at the entrance to the door. You want them slightly out of the door, so that again, they have got 4 guys to the side of the keep, and you have 20 pounding on the floor. I love when light cavalry like this is stacked up. Not again to kill horses, but they're just kind of part of the carnage. This fast, really damaging axe just goes through them like butter, and it's just carnage. So now we are on this side of the bridge. We're making an offensive attack here, a transitional attack, the military would call this, or the fire service. We want to move quickly. It's very important to spread our troops out here. Otherwise, that very same dynamic I was just talking about, where you're jammed up at the bridge and they've got 30 guys attacking you, the same thing applies. If I only get 100 people across the bridge and they have 500, we're fucking toast, right? Our guys are going to be all jammed up, and they're going to have 500 on 100, and we're fucked. So there's multiple actual references to this in real life. There's the Battle of Aspern, one of Napoleon's first losses, where they were crossing a bridge, and the enemy was able to blow out the bridge repeatedly and trap a lot of his troops on the side with the enemy. The enemy then went to work, right? They had the numerical advantage. Napoleon couldn't rebuild the bridge in time, and hence he suffered a defeat, right? He came back a couple weeks later, rebuilt a much stronger bridge, and destroyed the enemy. Napoleon was obviously very adept at adjusting his tactics. But it's something for you to think about. If you're coming across the bridge in a situation like this to confront the enemy offensively, you want to make sure your troops get across as fast as you can. Even if that means sending in some sacrificial troops to attack the enemy, it's okay to lose 30, 40, 50 troops. Don't have your 200 or 300 in a very bad spot for a very long period of time, right? You might even lose the battle. talked earlier about you make mistakes. I've probably done that playing Bannerlord at the beginning, where I jammed my troops into a situation where they were kind of doomed. If you're watching the video now, you know I might be able to prevent you from making that mistake. There's another battle, a famous historical battle. I'll probably do this a little bit more often when I'm narrating, especially in situations like this where it's just kind of a big melee scrum. You know, I could narrate what's going on here. Okay, my guys are killing their guys, and that guy just died, and you know, I'm going to try to add some intellectual conversation to this, give you actual real-world military tactics, the history behind it, so that you can then learn from that and apply it to your battles. It's called the Battle of the Crater from the Civil War, where the Union Army blew a big hole in the Confederate lines, and their plan then was to go around the hole, right, and attack effectively the flanks before then pouring up through the hole and then attacking the enemy on multiple sides. Well, unfortunately, there was some mixed orders and some inexperienced crews. They poured directly into the hole and just jammed themselves into this giant crater that was like 30 feet, 40 feet below the Confederate army they were attacking. And they were stuck. They couldn't scale the walls of this big crater, and the Confederate army just decimated this Union force. Even though the Union force had the initiative, they had the surprise, the Confederates were totally surprised by this explosive attack. The Union army ended up being totally annihilated in this battle. It's one of the worst ignominious failures of the Civil War. And that's another perfect example of jamming yourself tactically into a disastrous situation. I think General Grant, the leading general for the civilian war at the time, said it was the saddest day in U.S. history when that happened. Right? So you don't want to have the saddest day in Bannerlord history happen to you because you're not aware of that effect. Right? You want to make sure when you get across the bridge. I know I'm kind of beating this horse to death, but just to finish the point, when you get across the bridge, you see what I'm doing there. I'm immediately spreading my troops out to the sides. Right? That does two things. That gives us flanking edges to close in later on in the fight. It gives our archers a chance to shoot, right? They all have good line of sight. You can see my guy here at the end of this fight. I'm just cutting a path through their archers. You move fast, and so you literally just slice and dice. And their friends might be chasing you, but all their other friends die. Anyways, to finish that point, you've got your troops all spread out, and nobody's getting jammed up at the bridge, right? That's a critical thing to get out of that long rambling speech. Well, even inexperienced players, probably at this point, can understand that this battle is basically over. I mean, I might get killed here at the end of the battle, too, being kind of reckless. But we're across the bridge. We've decimated now 3 or 4 waves of their elite troops, and now it's just mop-up time. I still have very high-level troops. I'm probably down 600-700 troops out of an army of 2,000. Usually at least half of our army is high-level or elite-level troops, right? So we still have our elite-level troops. Meanwhile, it's the peasants and squires and guys coming in with like wooden crafted axes that their son made for them the night before they're killed. Right? Like this is not really a battle. I think Tale Worlds includes stuff like this just so people can get their aggression out and maybe they won't be a mass shooter. Right? Better that you massacre little digital pixels than run to your local school and start shooting kids. If there is an advantage of video games in that respect. You know, it's that men can get their war output, their war aggression out of their systems in a peaceful way. Much better for society if we just massacre peasants with our battle axe than road rage on the highway or try to bully somebody at school or something like that. Well, I appreciate people that have hung out to this point. I don't have some magnificent English accent. I don't actually like how I sound recorded, but enough people have asked for voiceover that I'm producing these videos. I'm not going to do it for every video. I simply don't have the time. You know, this requires watching all my battles for a second or third time after I've already played them. I do have a full-time job. But if people really appreciate and enjoy this content, and especially I could use feedback on whether or not they appreciated this type of voiceover. If you don't like the historical references, please say so. I don't want to bore people. my main purpose with this channel. It's definitely not to make money, by the way. I don't, the ads, I think, if you do see any ads, that's Google making money. I can't help you from there. I don't have any ads that are making money on this. My main purpose on this is to help build the Bannerlord community, and then also just talk advanced tactics with players. It really stimulates my brain to talk about ways to really dominate the enemy. So thanks for watching again. Subscribe, please. Like, do all that kind of stuff. Questions, comments, and until next time. A little battle wrap up. You know, we lost almost 1,000 troops, but look, we killed 45, almost 4,600, right? So that's obviously an incredible tactical victory. They would call that a decisive battlefield victory. I didn't see how many kills this guy had, but especially counting all the peasants at the end, it had to be at least 400. That was massacre C for sure that time. Looks like there's... This happens a lot at the end of battles. It's kind of a little silly quirk of the game. It looks like there's a single archer, or maybe it's a single horse archer, kiting my troops up into the hills. I've got like 200 guys chasing him. You would think he would just run, but instead it looks like he's running and shooting, because if he was fleeing, the battle would be already over, and I'd be able to conclude it. But evidently this guy doesn't give up. You know, I like his spirit. Look at him up there. He's way up in the hills. And it looks like he's trying to kite my cavalry. That's pretty epic. In fact, if this guy was a real person, he'd be recruited right away and put into our army. There's one guy left. Oh, come on, fellas, don't make me chase this one guy down. I'm gonna feel like that movie, The Professional, where there's one guy killing the whole police force, and that corrupt cop who's like, Benny, send me everyone. What do you mean, everyone? Everyone! All right, they finally got the guy. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.